It is a truth universally acknowledged that the book is better than the film.
Hello, my name is Badaptations, and can I leave this book with you for you to just peruse?
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Badaptations.
This time we'll be talking about Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, published in 1813.
And Pride and Prejudice, a latter-day comedy written and directed by a bunch of people you've never heard of, starring a bunch of people you've never heard of, and was released in 2003 and will be referred to throughout this film as
Mormon Pride and Prejudice. Mormon Pride and Prejudice. I think this is the first adaptation where we could say, like, this is a bad adaptation, and people will be like, okay, I get what you mean. So the novel was published in 1813. We have the Bennet family with 5 daughters, eldest to youngest, Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Kitty, and Lydia. Charles Bingley has moved into town, and he's a single man of good fortune. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. He meets Jane at a ball, they fall in love. We also meet Darcy at that same dance, and Lizzie overhears him saying that she's merely tolerable. And her pride is kind of hurt, so they're not off to a good start, despite the fact that he's richer than Bingley. We also have Mr. Collins, who is to inherit all of the Bennet's house and possessions. He proposes to Lizzie, she refuses him. He ends up marrying her best friend, Charlotte. Lizzie ends up visiting Charlotte later, and then we are introduced to Lady Catherine de Bourgh, a very rich widow. We find out that Darcy is her nephew. There's this whole social drama going on, and Lizzie tries to escape that for a moment, goes on a trip to the countryside with her aunt and uncle. They end up visiting Pemberley though, which is where Darcy lives. They come across him, we meet his sister, Georgiana, and through that encounter, Lizzie starts to realize, oh, he's not such a terrible person. But then, more drama! We find out that Lydia has run off with Wickham, the evil, pernicious Wickham, and Lizzie has to go back home. Mr. Bennet is off trying to solve this business. Darcy ends up salvaging the marriage, and then Lady Catherine de Bourgh, more drama, comes to tell off Lizzie, says, are you engaged to him? You must promise to never be engaged to him because he's engaged to my daughter. Lizzie refuses that as well, and Darcy hears about that, comes and asks her again if she will marry him. And happily ever after, we end up with Jane and Bingley, Lizzie and Darcy, and I guess Lydia and Wickham.
And so 2003's Mormon Pride and Prejudice looks like Kimmy Schmidt's caffeine-induced fever dream. It is bright and garish and not very Jane Austen. It's set in the contemporary moment, so 2003 when the film came out, and it's scored by Ben Carson with some, not that Ben Carson. Oh. The film changes the relationship between the characters, so rather than being related, there are no Bennets, there's just Elizabeth Bennet. There are no adults, they're all living together as roommates. So we have Elizabeth Bennet, her roommate Jane, who is Argentinian, and there's no reason why there's no explanation. And then we have Lydia Meryton and Kitty Meryton, so playing on all of the places that Jane Austen covers in Pride and Prejudice. And Lydia is the owner of the house because... yeah,
she's like a spoiled brat.
And then we have Mary Lambton. So all the sisters are there, but they're not related. Then we have Darcy, who is a publisher, Will Darcy. We have Jack Wickham, who's just a douche. And then Charles Bingley, who just like a dog, golden retriever. I mean, you could replace him with a golden retriever, and
which is funny because he makes music for dogs.
Can listening to Mozart really make you smarter? The answer is yes. And now it's not just for humans.
And so the plot follows very similarly to the Austen plot. William Collins is there.
I found a great article on the glories of womanhood in a 1978 magazine. Thought it might be useful for your book.
Elizabeth is a writer. She comes into contact with Darcy through Charles and eventually finds out that Darcy is her publisher. She works hard to get her novel published. Everybody ends up happy in the end after some drama. The plot weirdly centers around this book called The Pink Bible, which is a real book, but you can't find it anymore. So Wayback Machine, that website, and you will find The Pink Bible and you can read excerpts from it. So that's Mormon Pride and Prejudice in a nutshell. Do you want to talk about the Pink Bible?
Sure. I think that's interesting that they replaced Mrs. Bennet with the Pink Bible, because we really get like Mrs. Bennet and society, but Mrs. Bennet is like the character that most pushes the girls to get married. And in here we have like a book.
Yeah, which is a book that's being sold, that's a real book, but it's being derided in the film. So the character that uses the book the most is Lydia.
Here, Kitty, read chapter 3.
And Lydia almost gets into a polygamous marriage, and all she cares about is finding a husband. But at the end, the book gets thrown out the window, and Lydia ends up being this self-promoting, self-help person who writes this book, I look good for myself and my friends.
Yeah.
So she completely abandons the whole thing.
Actually watching the film, I'd watched this film a long time ago, and it's a little more feminist than I remembered. Elizabeth is an out-and-out feminist. I think if we look at the plot line, it is interesting. She gets her book published.
I finished my novel, and I think I have a good idea for the next one.
And she presumably goes to like graduate school, or she's a TA.
I gotta stop on this.
Uh-huh.
What the heck was going on? She's 26, but it seems like she's in an undergrad classroom.
Yeah.
And there's one point where she's talking to Jane about hanging out with pre-meds. Pre-meds are undergrad. These women are 26.
Right.
I freeze-framed her essay that she wrote.
It's a terrible essay.
Yeah, it's a 300 level class too, so she's in undergrad.
Oh, so yeah, but that she's a TA.
Yeah, but if you wrote or directed this film and you are watching this, explain to us.
Please let us consult on your next film. And she doesn't end up not going abroad because of Darcy.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point.
As for me, well, I went to London.
Yeah, because I was expecting that she would, you know, like the cliched moment where like she goes to the airport and then realizes what's really important is what she left behind. She doesn't do that. She goes to England, she gets her book published, preparing a new novel, and we can also mention that like Darcy, he does come off as an entitled ass in the beginning, but his partner in the publishing firm is a woman.
D&G Publishing? Janice had an emergency come up.
Yeah. So that does speak in some way to his personality and that he's not such an awful person. There are other moments which are blatantly not feminist, especially with Collins.
You know, usually when we think of the type that don't want to get married, it's the ugly one. When Abraham went looking for a wife, I mean, did all the girls say, no way?
Yeah. And even him, though, it seems like the movie's trying to show different forms of feminism. So, like, the choice feminism of Mary, who actually likes traditional values, and going with Colin, who likes traditional values, versus Elizabeth, who's like, I'm writing a steampunk novel about a mechanical engineer from the Regency era who's a woman.
She's a mechanical engineer.
The movie is so weird in the sense that Pride and Prejudice makes sense because it's constrained by the era, women are constrained by certain gender roles, and Austen is creating this interesting, nuanced way of navigating these roles. It's 2003. There's no real entailment anymore. These women are like educated, living on their own and together. And so the movie can't figure out if it wants to focus on this weird marriage plot or like women's independence and not having to depend on marriage.
Yeah, I don't know. I think all the relationships are messed up in this film. As much as they try to keep some of the dynamic with like Jane and Elizabeth being really close, I don't buy it. And I think you have to have them be sisters for that to work. But Jane goes off and does her thing and like leaves Elizabeth behind in order to go find Bingley again.
What is Jane's? Why is she here? Does she go to school?
Yeah, what does she do?
What does she? I still.
Other than wear red and be Latina.
Yeah, that was actually like a trivia note. Thank you, Amazon Prime. But yeah, like what we know that Lydia and Kitty both are wealthy and they own the house, so that makes sense. But like Mary and Jane and then
yeah, what is Mary doing?
Yeah, she's just.
I can't buy that Elizabeth and Mary are like taking the same classes or going to the same school even.
No, none of this makes sense. And then Charlotte Lucas is like there for a flash.
Hey,
Sings a little bit. Comes into a bookstore, buys the Pink Bible, and then we don't hear from her again. And so the actor who plays Charlotte, I guess, is actually part of the Church of Latter-day Saints. So there are real Mormons in this Mormon Pride and Prejudice. and she won American Idol or did something on American Idol.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess her presence was just basically like celebrity power.
The musical interlude is so cringeworthy. It seems like they're 10 years behind.
Okay, yeah, because they use floppy disk. I'm pretty sure in 2003 floppy disks were not really still a thing. And everybody has like tank tops with like, they have modesty tops on, so there's no cleavage.
Now there's Cammie's Secret.
Comparing Pride and Prejudice to other adaptations of it, I mean, there are so many Jane Austen adaptations, and I've probably watched all of them. So usually when we have a full cast of British people, and I don't get why Darcy is just the random British person in this one. Darcy is the epitome of Britishness in popular imagination.
Thank you, Colin Firth.
Thank you, wet shirt scene. I don't buy why Charles and Darcy are friends. And how does Darcy know Wickham? How does Wickham meet Anna? Oh, her name isn't Georgiana.
Anna's not a strange name.
Don't you dare. Tragically, Euphemiana is.
And they like fondue. Who does fondue? That's like 80s, no, 70s cocaine and fondue. Like those seem like, and Burt Reynolds is there. Like that.
The whole scene,
It's
I
just
don't
so
get it.
weird. She falls asleep in a field and then breaks and enters into a
There's like
cabin.
a montage of her dreaming this like gothic romance, which I think they lifted from Northanger Abbey. It has nothing to do with Pride and Prejudice. She wakes up, it's raining, she goes and finds the cabin. She just, walks straight into someone else's house. That's a great idea. And it happens to be Darcy and his sister Anna.
And Darcy comes out with a cricket bat, the most British thing possible.
Anna and Darcy, they have different accents.
Will you go take a shower?
Our parents had a very strange sense of humour.
How about Las Vegas as the city of sin?
It's such lazy writing.
So the film takes place in Provo, Utah. Mormon Pride and Prejudice, without necessarily being super Mormon. Any reference to religion is very like non-committal, very bland. It's just like, we went to church. Have you read your Bible? And the only time we get like Mormon is when they're bored with Bible verses, and then if you look up the Bible verses, they're Mormon Bible. It's like basically, God's going to kill you, and how not to curse your servants. So somebody just picked some random person.
Oh, and can we talk about like the weird quote title scenes?
Yeah.
They just picked the most random thing.
Yeah.
Like, why did you need to quote that? That's ridiculous. I think this film is just confused.
It's so confused. It wants to be something, it just doesn't know.
I'm trying to think of like a drinking game to go with this film.
Every time you see a modesty top.
I need to talk to you about something. There he goes. Come on.
You will be snickered in like 4 minutes. So it's weirdly Mormon, but not Mormon. There's like an amen at the end.
Amen.
Oh my god, I noticed that too. When I'm watching like films like this, I never watch the credit scenes. And I just had it in the background. I was actually cross-stitching. Not the same as Mary's cross-stitch.
That's interesting.
On to our ratings. I almost feel a little bad calling this a Badaptation, but we're gonna go ahead and do that. So, Badaptation. It's just like not a good film. If you really just need a pick-me-up, I think this is a good film for that because you don't have to think about it. It's just not a good film. But it's also not terrible. We have some movies lined up that are awful. They're so bad. Badaptations. This is not that. But it is definitely not something where you can be like, I think this improved the Jane Austen novel.
I'm gonna go with Badaptation as well. This is the filmic equivalent of cotton candy dipped in glitter. I feel dirty for liking it. So if you ever just want some self-loathing, go watch it. Like, it's unintentionally funny, but then it's also actually intentionally funny. Yeah, like Amy said, it's a really good pick-me-up. It's just so stupid and mindless. Don't go into it thinking it's like going to be this wonderful Colin Firth-esque Austen adaptation.
If you're the type that like fights over the merits of BBC Pride and Prejudice over Keira Knightley Pride and Prejudice, you will hate this film.
Oh my god, and sorry, BBC wins out every
Yes.
time. There's a reason why you have probably never heard of these people. Although, the actor who plays Jane apparently is dating Al Pacino, which made me kind of vomit a little bit.
What?
Yeah, there's pictures of her with him, and it's sad. So we're gonna Photoshop a picture of her with Al Pacino, but we're gonna put a cat or column Earth over that head. So we're gonna fix that for you.
Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a like and please subscribe to our channel. We do have some ideas. So we're thinking of doing maybe some kind of change, maybe a podcast,
An interpretive dance, some artistic renderings.
Yeah, so do you think you would listen to a podcast more? Would you miss having the video clips? Yeah, just let us know what we can do to make our channel better. If it hasn't been taken down by this point, we watched the full movie on YouTube, so we'll try to link it in the description below and you can go watch it.
It's also on Amazon Prime. If you're having one of those late night, don't know what I'm gonna do with my life, everything seems sad and bleak, it's right there waiting for you.
Enjoy.
I'll just leave it here. Here's Mormon Pride and Prejudice for you to see.